All right, everyone, hello. My name is Jedziniak. I am a sports performance coach intern at Marquette University. And today I'm going to be talking about my annual program I created for the sport of fencing. Who here has fenced before? Anyone? Actually, really? Could you tell me about your experience with fencing? What were some of the main features of the sport?
Quick feet.
Quick feet?
Yeah.
I won't be doing that anytime soon because I have a boot on. But it is a very fast-paced sport. As you can see here, this guy is pretty much airborne, going at his opponent with an attack. So first, explain the sport just a little bit, considering we might not all be familiar with it. Here's the environment that you'll be working with. So the playing platform is called a piste. It's a 14-meter platform, okay, and it's separated equally for both fencers. So the fencers will be lined up about 4 meters apart from each other. You have to also account for the fact that they have a sword that's quite long, so they're going to be they're going to be able to cover that distance within a reasonable amount of time. So the surface is made of either metal or rubber, and it's all everything's pretty much connected and electrified. This is in order to with the onset of electronic fencing. This is so we can keep track of points and who's scoring what because it's such a fast-paced sport. So their whole suit is electrified along with the sword as well. So this is going to determine who scored the point actually and who touched first. So for the types of fencing you can do, there's foil, epee, and saber. Okay, so depending on what type of weapon you're using is what rules you're going to be subject to, as well as where you can make contact with the opponent, what's your target area. So protective equipment, considering we are using swords, there's quite a bit of protective equipment that goes along with it. The mask, that's pretty characteristic of the sport, along with the entire suit. It's all pretty much, it's made of Kevlar usually, so it's a little bit heavier maybe. For footwear, these athletes are going to be using, it's a shoe that's pretty lightweight, but it also has quite a bit of stability and not too much give to it. This is used for spring more so, but also you don't want too much flexing at the foot. So again, with the rules, just to explain a little bit more, what swords you're actually able to touch with. So points are awarded based on a contact. Okay. So for foil and epee, you're able to use the tip of your sword, and once you hit your opponent with the tip in either the torso range for the foil or the entire body for the epee, you would score a point on your opponent. Okay. For saber, you can use any part of the sword to make contact with the upper body of your opponent anywhere on there, and then you would be awarded a point for that. The difference between these swords, the saber is a little bit heavier typically. The epee has a little bit more give to it. It's a little bit more of a more malleable sword, along with the foil as well. So the duration of the match is about 9 minutes. Okay, so it's 3-minute periods, but first one to score 15 wins. So usually a match does not go for the entire duration. So it's a very, small, small amount of time reasonably that you're there. For boundaries, if you step out of the boundary with 1 foot on the sides of the piste, the referee will say you have to line up again, but your opponent is given an advantage over you. Okay, now if I was to step both feet off the piste, a point would be given to my opponent. So it's very important to be conscious of where you are on the map. All right, so to get into this, there's a lot of basically movements that are used in fencing, considering you are using an object as well. Here's just a couple of the kinesiology of what fencing would be and what types of motions are occurring at the main joints of the sport. So the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist are really the key and most important joints, I'd say, for the upper body in the sport, along with the hip, ankle, and knee. So we're also going to be talking about later in the program, what I'm going to be doing to prevent injuries at these joints as well. So for the needs analysis, it's considering the effort that these athletes are going to be having is about maybe no more than 5 seconds, typically, depending on what type of sword you're using. So we're going to be primarily using ATP phosphocreatine sources for our primary energy source, along with anaerobic glycolysis for those efforts that last a little bit longer. So it's a reasonably short amount of time before they are given a break to reset and just rest for a moment. Back to the on-guard line. So primary biomotor abilities that I was looking into for the sport are agility and quickness, so being able to react fast to an opponent, whether it's an attack or being able to plan an attack and respond quickly. Also balance, being able to stay within the boundary of the piste, and coordination, because you are using an object for the whole thing, so you need to be able to coordinate your lower body with your upper body in terms of where your opponent is, and also power, so plyometric power necessarily, not trying to move weight, like large amounts of weight during this. So my off-season mesocycle, I use a 2-to-1 periodization method. So 2 days where we're making linear progressions, and then 1 day where my stress level is going to be decreased below level preparedness. So for my training frequency, I wanted them in the weight room 4 times a week, and we're going to be doing conditioning twice. Conditioning is going to consist of agility exercises, things that we're going to do to train reactive times for these athletes. That's my primary focus for that. This is from May to August for the off-season. So my primary goals and emphasis was, I'm assuming that this is my first time working with these athletes. So we're going to be working on basically basic strength and just technique. So working with freshmen so they understand how to perform the lift properly and not to become injured during the season. Also, core stability, I believe, is another primary focus of mine. Just a good thing to establish early on in the season, and also plyometric power. So this is just a piece of my macro cycle that I have cut out so I can make it easier to see. But here's what I'm doing for my intensities. It's low to moderate, so my intensities are going to be generally lower, but my volumes are going to be increased during this point of the season. Technique, they're going to be they're not going to be practicing a lot during the off season, but there will be some practice for them to work on their technique. As you can see, I have my linear progression here, and also working back on that. But key emphasis on the plyometrics, just getting that power down, and also with the technique too. This is a just sample of my lifting card. So for the first, this is the 3 weeks basically I would have on here. So we have the first week, the second week, and then the third week. So a couple things I'd like to highlight within the program. I start with the dynamic warm-up on each program. Power exercise to begin with, so we can maximize the effort the athletes will be giving. Also, things I thought about when training. So I have a back squat programmed in here with a 4-second eccentric. I wanted to be able to mimic a stance with these athletes, and also having them explode off of their leg in order to attack their opponent. So I wanted them to be fast and dynamic, and also focusing on the core. So preseason, using a 3-to-1 periodization method, they're a greater level of preparedness. So I believe they'd be able to handle that. So for agility and quickness, I wanted it to be very basic. Also more specific and dynamic balance activities during this time. This is from September to October, so a short amount of time to get them ready. I have testing every 4 weeks about. So what I would be testing would be broad jump. I would be using a T-test as well as a 20-yard dash. So something that's linear quickness and power. So as you can see, I changed my periodization model here, and also with my lifting card too. So working to more specific motions. So working on a front squat, the sideline lateral bound, or they have it's a single leg, and then also be landing on one leg with a hop then after that. So really exploding off that leg, and then also working on challenge balance activities where they're given a task with their upper body while also having to balance on one leg. So more specific. And then the in-season, so same thing with the 3-to-1 periodization method from November to March. Lifting 3 times a week, conditioning twice. Still working on sport-specific agility, maintaining explosive abilities. So for this, just, also I want to include stretching with these athletes, keep them from getting too sore during the season, also keep their joints mobile because they are going to be competing during this time. They're going to be partaking in about 25 matches during this time, potentially, depending on the amount of tournaments that they would do. So then after that, I highlight some things in my program. I included some differences in here, so more specific exercises for each, but also working on shoulder stability and wrist stability, and where I would have these athletes, seeing them as becoming injured. For the postseason, I just wanted them to take some time away from the sport. Active rest is great. I don't think that they need to be practicing fencing. Otherwise, I want them to still think that lifting and fencing is fun. So just avoiding burnout with our athletes. And then for conditioning, so like I said, how are we going to be able to train these athletes to be quicker and respond faster? I wanted to be able to decrease their response time by having them, be able to predict and anticipate what it looks like for an athlete to be attacking them. Also with this, having them in a situation where they have multiple decisions to make, and they have to choose the right one at that time. So I think that being able to respond faster through experience would be the best way to train that. And here's just a sample of my conditioning session. Very specific drills to fencing that I had created for a sword and hoop drill. So having 2 hoops, one red, one green, coaches here, fencers over there, so I yell, drop both, and I yell green or red. Fencer has to be able to catch one with their sword. And then here's just a sample of what my entire macro cycle would look like, which I have broken up for you in the presentation. But this is what it would look like as a whole. And any questions, please?
Good. Allie?
I know you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think that like the balance component is really important in fencing. So what kind of things are you specifically doing? Balance exercises? Or are you incorporating within your other exercises? Or
Yeah, so I mainly just wanted to go for the balance exercises, like focusing on them specifically, not necessarily with another exercise. That is a possibility, though. But with that, I have specific tasks for them. So like having maybe say, I believe I put, doing a different task, but also like having the balance exercise after that, so we can superset and incorporate that in, but not use too much time during the lift.
Okay, Paul?
So when you talked about kind of the area that they used, it's basically like a line, right?
Yeah, essentially, it's about 1.5 meters wide.
So there's very minimal lateral movement in
Very
the sport,
minimal.
right? So how does that affect your programming? So does that mean you're going to work more in more of the sagittal plane, more sagittal plane movements? Are there any multi-directional movements?
Yes, absolutely. But considering the fencer with their stance, so they are standing like this with a staggered stance, you're also going to be pushing off your glute too, and using the same types of muscles you'd be using the frontal plane maybe for exploding off of them. But also not necessarily focusing on, in my agility sessions, moving sideways. Really it's just forward, backward, that's pretty much it.
Will?
So I know you had said if you step 1 foot out of bounds, the opponent gets an advantage. What would that be?
An advantage is a 1 meter advance on your opponent. So how I had the on-guard line about 4 meters, so they would be 1 meter ahead into your territory.
Okay.
So you have less room to move.
Okay.
Any further questions? John?
Why did you decide to do a 2-to-1 season?
I was assuming this would be my first time working with the athletes, so I, if this is my first time having them in the weight room, I don't want to be, overloading them with a 3-to-1 progression. So I decided that 2-to-1 would be a better way to get them used to the, types of intensities and volumes that they'd be experiencing first.